Everybody, welcome to episode 3 of the Watch Engine Show. Super excited to jump in today. It's Friday, so it's always nice to be able to relax on the weekend, unless you're one of us three. Got a serious golf player and then worker bees over here. But we're going to jump in. We got 3 questions for you today, and we're going to go ahead and jump into the first one.
Okay, our first question is from Cora, and it's, how do you overcome the fear of entrepreneurial failure?
That's a great question. I've started 7 businesses over the course of my life. More than that if you count the ones we've incubated through our e-commerce accelerator. And 3 of them, I guess you'd say, were successful. 4th is engine. Hopefully that'll be the 4th successful one here. But it's never be afraid to fail. I mean, it's normal for these things to fail. And I was moderating an event a few years ago, and there's some Wall Street bigwigs there, and I was the moderator, and so I asked them how they dealt with failure in the big banks, and then they posed the question back to me: how do you deal with failure in the entrepreneurs you either backed or companies you've started or whatever? So, if you write an entrepreneur a check, a seed fund, let's say, and you give him $100,000 or $50,000 or $250,000, and his company fails, so how do you deal with that? So, I want to fund his next company because there was something smart about the guy for me to fund him in the first place. And if he fails, he's learned a lot from it. So you've got to learn something from it and not be afraid of the failure. Now, that's not an excuse to go, I'll give up. I just failed. It's normal. But you shouldn't be afraid of it as you dive in because it's normal to fail. And in fact, in my last venture, here we are, we're 5 years in, we've raised $100 million of venture capital, and the thing started going sideways. It was not the best outcome from a company that raised $100 million of capital. But, what did you learn from it, and how did you build something great there? And that's what we did. That's a tough one. You just can't even think about it. You got to know it's normal for failure and act like it's not there, I guess, is the best answer to that.
Yeah, and I think coming from an experience, it's a really unique point of view coming from yourself because looking at the failure, I love that you want to invest in his next company. Something that's really interesting from people who are joining an entrepreneurial venture, joining a startup, things of that nature, you got to realize that you're joining a company that even if that company does nothing but introduce you to the top people in your industry, the top people in your space, it's how you frame the thought of failure, because ultimately it's going to lead you to the next best thing that you could ever create. I mean, Slack is an amazing example that comes to mind. Slack as a company failed in their first venture, which then led
Weren't they
to
like
Slack.
some huge multiplayer universe game?
Like a game dev studio.
Yeah, game dev. Okay, and that failed, and here's Slack, obviously.
Communication.
Not the most logical transition. Yeah, it seems like the communication platform, they were building that internally for their own team to use as they built that game, and then there was some core of that, I think, in the game, and they
Right.
So, I mean, if you look at even seed-funded companies, and those are the best of the best, right? I mean, if you're a startup and you know how hard it is to get seed capital, only the best ones typically get seed capital. Well, 28% of those, which is a very low number, go on to raise a Series A. So that means that 72%, if my math's right, failed. Well, same thing on the Series A to Series B. There's only 36-ish% that move on from Series A to Series B. So these are the best companies around, and you get, 1 in 10 of them go from seed all the way up to Series B. Fear of failure happens at all levels,
right.
Even Silicon Valley-backed, VC-backed companies.
Yeah. Very good.
Perfect. Now let's take a look at the second question. It's another one from Cora, and this person's asking that they've heard that search engines are designed to reward the sites that have been around for a long time. Does this mean that employing SEO strategies for newer sites or smaller businesses won't work and shouldn't be done?
95 days has been the mantra. I don't know if it's exact. I don't know if this has been reproven, but a lot of smart people I've talked to have said the same thing. So let's assume it's 95 days. So you register a new domain, get it somehow indexed in Google, and 95 days after is when the first big penalty is raised. So, what's that, 3 months?
Yeah.
So what do you do to after that initial newness penalty is lifted? Well, it's trust. And the longer that a domain has been around, the more trust it garners. So it's not like this magical thing. I mean, maybe there is a sandbox or whatever that happens after the first few days or weeks or even a couple, 3 months after a domain is first registered. But after that, I mean, it's pretty much just trust. And how do you get trust? Well, it's inbound links from trusted sources that are on topic. So that's really it. It's definitely not something you wouldn't pursue. In fact, that's the only way to leap over that hurdle and get trust, is to build inbound links from trusted sources in your industry.
So, question on this, because SEO is not something that I am super savvy in, but when you're thinking about it just from a business perspective, talking about the difference between tried and true methods and tactics, what do you think the importance of? Because it seems like in this space, especially in the e-commerce space, people are looking for tactics on growth hacking or arbitraging. Speaking to the difference between what you should be focused on versus short-term, what is that good balance of you need to be focusing on tried and true, what your business is going to be 5 years from now, versus the little hacks, tips, and tricks that are going to get you from point A to point B along that journey?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're starting out, you have to do a couple hacks. But the thing is, Google is getting really good at determining these hacks. I've done a lot of white hat, which is great content with links into it. I've also done a lot of black hat, which is gaming the system, and then every bit of gray in between. And what I've always come back to is good content almost always wins the day. So if you create something that is truly good and people truly link to it and truly say good things around that content in the link, then it appears natural to the search engine. So that, to me, is the gold standard. I'm not saying there aren't hacks to make it work, and I'm not saying I don't have 40 of them that we'll try internally. But
tucked away.
Yeah, tucked away. Some of them, are they black hat or are they gray hat? Well, definitely not black hat. I think Google is good enough to truly figure out, for the most part, unless you're very discreet about it, paid links or, any of the spammy, scummy tactics of buy my Ray-Ban sunglasses here and go inject it into a million WordPress blogs. And Google's not stupid. So I think you have to be on either work super hard to appear natural or create really good content. To me, I'd rather work really hard to create good content because it's just as hard to make things natural and cheat. So
it'll build.
Right.
Yep.
Hacks die away eventually.
Yeah, exactly. It's a most long-term thing I think you can do is build real good quality backlinks, and that takes years a lot of times, but you got to start somewhere.
Yeah. Our third and final question for today is some feedback on a clothing store. So this Redditor asked for some feedback on a new clothing store they launched about a month ago. It's kind of AthleticYogi gear, kind of fashion-oriented, and they're wanting a breakdown on their site. They've got steady traffic and minimal sales. So let's dig into this site.
And while he's pulling that up, guys, branding is such a interesting topic because the best person to ask how on key or on customer your branding is your customer. Obviously you want to stay true to, if you're a designer, you're a creative, and that's your brand, then you need to stay true to yourself with minimal feedback. But if you're a company, especially a company building for a consumer, I just want to preface this with, I don't know when the last time y'all squeezed into some yoga pants were, but these are going to be higher level. It's a bad image in my head now. These are going to be some higher level thoughts. These are going to be some higher level thoughts on branding and structuring the company, and then going from there.
Yeah. So when you first land on their homepage, I would say that their nav here is getting lost in the image a little bit. So maybe have some sort of gradient or something behind their nav so that you can kind of actually dig in to what's going on.
It looks good on some images, and others it fades in. Yeah.
The imagery's good though. And they break right into product categories and then down into probably a grid of specific product.
So Blake, question here. This, from a design standpoint of the website, this looks like, obviously it's templated. Mm-hmm. How do you have the ability, or what is someone's options, a part of their brand, to be a different user experience on the site itself? Like, can you talk about this structure versus something like, perhaps with Engine.
Yeah.
What is that difference? What is that customability, and how does that reflect in the brand itself?
Sure. So if you're on a Shopify template and you don't have the HTML and CSS skills to fully brand that perfectly how you want it to look like, you can start working on things like fonts, things like button colors, and start changing those to match your brand, and that will go a long way from standing out and making your site look kind of more customized and less kind of stock Shopify theme you get from like jumping out of the gate.
I'm the algorithmic marketer here. You don't want branding lessons from me. It would. This to me looks great. I mean, I don't know what it is, but what I've always found is when I'm with, as an algorithmic marketer, a good brand marketer, it's 1 + 1 = 3. And that to me, how you build a brand by math, okay, comes down to beautiful imagery, number one. And that, you can build a brand around beautiful imagery. I mean, think about it. You're on Instagram, let's say.
Yep.
Well, how many pixels do you have? It's not like you can go tell your life story of how this brand came to being and the genesis is this and we're so passionate and you should follow us because of whatever. It comes down to imagery.
Yep.
And then likewise, where your brand is associated with is another mathy type thing. It comes down to customer acquisition. So which influencers are wearing your product on their feed in the wild? That to me is a great brand building exercise. It goes beyond the design. And you can actually measure a lot of the things that I for a long time I thought branding was hocus pocus and wizard stuff and it didn't make any sense. And now the math supports everything you guys just said.
Yep.
Yeah. And from a branding perspective, I mean, I love math, I love quant marketing, but I also am a very romantic marketer in the fact that I sometimes think math is a post-game decision or a way to optimize something that's already great. You look at amazing brands and brand videos. So Dollar Shave Club pops up, just straight top of mind with an amazingly well done branding video. And it literally led to, I mean, you can speak from the math perspective, but without that video, without that sketch comedy, without his branding behind it, I don't think they have nearly the success that they have. And so from that, and you look at other companies like Supreme is an amazing company to talk about from a branding perspective because their brand is very interesting. They don't really interact with their consumers. They're very, this is what we like, and if you like it, great. If you don't, we don't care. And it's created such a culture that people, there's an entire subculture of people who just sell Supreme clothing as resellers that are not an actual business. It's just in the streets selling things.
Yep.
So what makes a brand unique is ultimately having that combination of a math marketer as well as a brander who knows how to culture hack, knows how to understand what a consumer wants a minute before the consumer realizes that's what they want.
I'm hurt though. You hurt my feelings, and I'm going to be honest about it. You said you're a romantic marketer. I've seen some spreadsheets that are just pure romance.